This government's focused on affordability. Half of the measures in the update are to make life more affordable Canadians.
The Prime Minister repeating exactly the same policies: more debt, more costs, more taxes. He's just another Liberal.
Liberals' economic update is drawing criticism over rising spending despite a lower than expected deficit. The opposition says the measures outlined are not enough to ease cost of living pressures. So where did Ottawa put those priorities in the economic update? Is it enough to tackle the current economic uncertainty? Let's bring in our Sunday Scrum. Nick Taylor Vaisey is the Ottawa Bureau Chief for Politico, co-host of the Playbook Canada podcast. Emilie Nicolas is a columnist for Le Devoir in Montreal. And Rob Shaw is a political correspondent for CHEK News. He's in Victoria. Nice to see everyone this morning. Thanks for being here. We're still talking about this update, even though it was not the biggest update on the planet, but it is still drawing criticism. Pierre Poilievre was out this morning even talking again about the size of the deficit and the growing debt. What did you make of it, Nick, just in terms of what it tells you about whether the government understands sort of the moment that we are in when it comes to affordability in particular?
Well, I think the government is understanding in real time the limits of some of its measures, the limits of the impact they can have on Canadians immediately or in the longer term. I passed by the Shell station that is nearest Mark Carney's house today. And gas was up near $1.90 a litre. That's almost 30 cents more than it was the day that his government took the federal excise tax off of gasoline. So they took 10 cents off, but now it's and so people feel that. The government talks a lot about the groceries and essentials benefit that will be in place as of June, but there you have another issue. That is not immediate relief for people. It is means tested. It does get only to the people who need it, but that's all the way in June. A lot of household spending to happen between now and then. So the challenge in a big document like this is it's yet another kind of waypoint, I think, on the Carney government's journey from day one, canceling that consumer carbon tax, to some point in the future when we live in a country full of nation-building projects. This is a waypoint that shows just how long-term that challenge kind of is and how hard it is to keep Canadians on board.
Yeah, I filled up my car yesterday too and was kind of stunned. And I can't imagine how people who have, lots of kids or have to have a long commute to work, how they're dealing with things right now. We've lost Emilie, but I'll go to you, Rob, while we see if we can get her back. There does seem to be sort of like, at this stage anyway, a bit of a disconnect between sort of the Prime Minister's macro view of the economy and the things that he's trying to do to spur growth, and then the way people feel about the economy.
Yeah, well, I get to complain more because gas is $2.20 a liter out here. So
you're in the worst position. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and there is a disconnect, I think, too, between maybe what Canadians thought a Mark Carney government would be in terms of like spending prudence and fiscal kind of management, and then the idea in this update, which is basically that there's an unexpected windfall of cash on Ottawa from oil prices, and it's all being spent sort of immediately, and that the resulting deficit reduction is very small, that there is no path to balance as far as the eye can see, that, over a period of like 3 years, the deficit might go down like 18%. I'm not sure if it hits the mark between providing affordability now, as Nick was saying, but then also the idea that this is going to be a kind of prudent government because it really is just spending everything that comes in and more. And so those two disconnects are the real problem path that Mr. Carney has to navigate and how Canadians are going to receive this.
Though that big chunk of the deficit, a lot of that was because of that pause on the excise gas tax. So you're kind of stuck, right? Like people are calling for you to do something, you do it, and then you get criticized for spending too much money. Emilie, you're back. Let me get your perspective on how you think the government is understanding the way people are feeling about the economy and whether the update did enough to address that.
Well, there's the thing about the tax break itself on the cost of fuel. It was something that is very visible in terms of, when there's a hike in price gases, you see it in big red flashing numbers across basically our towns. So there is understandably very easy to put on the evening news and to make reports on it and to have demands for it. At the end of the day, the people who benefit the most from that measure are people who own the biggest cars, not necessarily the people who are the most impoverished in this country. And you do see that when you make the calculation, although it is costing a lot of money to the government, it isn't making that much of a difference in terms of people's money in their pockets at the end of the month. And that was a conservative demands, and that was a liberal. Also, people within the Liberal parties are certainly not just victims of this. They fell for it. And now you do have a dent in the income of government that didn't make that much of difference in people's needs when it comes to people who actually were hit the most by the affordability crisis. And so it was basically the chronicles of an announced basically populist tax break, and this is what we're seeing now. And I think a lot of people, I don't know if we're going to learn from this or if we're going to fall for that again, but the momentum to push for this and the fact that now people are not feeling like they've got a lot of a break for in terms of grocery costs or in terms of cost of living, this was very much foreseeable.
I wonder, Nick, what the update told you about sort of where the government is going. And I point to the skills and development, labor, trade stuff. We're going to talk with someone later in the program about that. And there is a recognition that if the country is going to do all these big things, we need people to actually do them. And so it was, an idea to help fund getting people into the trades. What does that indicate to you and about their overall strategy?
Yeah, some of the biggest spending that that made use of that windfall that Rob mentioned went to $6 billion for skilled trades. Now, this is not the first government to talk about skilled trades and the need to have more skilled workers in Canada. In fact, the Harper government, a little more than a decade ago, made a big show in a budget also of trying to match and fill skilled trade gaps in Canada. The difference then was Harper at the time was being told by business leaders, we have this huge gap, we need to fill it, what are you doing? Do something. And now it's Carney's government saying, we have this big nation building agenda. We can't build these projects without skilled workers. And I think what he knows, what the Prime Minister knows, what everybody in the country knows is you can't build a big thing like you could in the 19th century. He used the Rideau Canal example in a speech this week. And Carney and Pierre Poilievre also both talk a lot about building the railway. You can't build a railway in Canada like you could in the 19th century and get away with it. And so this is a big chunk of money that is trying to solve a persistent problem, but reframing it as a nation-building issue.
Rob?
Yeah, and I think also the youth unemployment rate comes into it too, because we haven't really heard a coherent strategy to tackle that. And there is a drop-off of people who get into the Red Seal trades training program who never make their way through. And I have heard nothing but positive sort of reception to the idea of subsidies, not just for employers on skilled trades training, but also for people, grants to help top up their EI while they're going through it. And I think there might be something there on the youth unemployment part of it. But I'm in a province where not that long ago, there was Site C being built. There was the Coastal GasLink pipeline and the Trans Mountain pipeline and LNG Canada all at the same time, the biggest projects in the country, and just ran out of people to build them. And so it is an acute problem. The provinces are going to like this measure. Unions will love it, and the private sector is going to like it. I think of all the things in the economic update, this is probably the one that they're going to get criticized least about.
For sure. Emilie, last word to you on that.
Well, they did manage to get criticized for it by Quebec. Because it's actually
you can count on Quebec.
No, but they're actually factually correct. It is not a federal government's job. It is the provincial government's competency there. Right. And so they're trying to negotiate basically some sort of a deal to have the money transferred, that they should do it themselves. I don't know if there's other provincial programs that are also about trade skills that could also be matched. So the how is still to be seen because this is actually not part of the federal government's competency, although it looks great on paper. But for those provinces who pay attention to this, there might be some bumps in the application of it.
let's be clear, we're never going to cut our American allies off of our energy or selling our resources. They buy twice as much as the rest of the world combined buys from Canada. But we can offer in the negotiations to build up our resources in a way that helps our continental security, that keeps both of us safe, strong, and rich.
Opposition leader Pierre Poilievre speaking just this morning in Toronto, answering a question about that cross-border Bridgers pipeline that U.S. President Donald Trump gave his approval to last week. It comes as Ottawa and Alberta look into possible routes for a pipeline to the BC coast. So how likely is either? What are the politics involved? Let's bring back our Sunday Scrum. Nick Taylor Vaisey, Ottawa bureau chief for Politico, co-host of Playbook Canada podcast, Emilie Nicolas, columnist for Le Devoir in Montreal, and Rob Shaw, political correspondent for CHEK News in Victoria. Emilie, I'm going to start with you if I can. Maybe let's just start on whether that pipeline that the president has approved should be something hopeful for Canada, is a point of leverage. I'm not sure the Prime Minister believes it is. And certainly we heard from the Energy Minister there that I don't think anyone wants to put all their eggs in the same basket. But it seems like it should be on the table as a negotiating point. So I'll start there with you, Emilie.
I mean, any indication that Canada is contributing to the American economy would be something to point out in a rational negotiation. I think we've left that land a long time ago, and so that's why just traditional logic doesn't necessarily keep track with reality. I also think that it's really important when you look at the other potential Pacific leading pipelines that people are thinking through, that now, since the extension of Trans Mountain, there is more that is going to China and Japan, South Korea, but also that for the most part, even if Canadian oil goes to the ocean, a lot of it is just basically still redirected to the United States as well. And so we still have a long way to have that diversification. And it's a hard question because first of all, Asian Pacific countries are also trying to leave themselves from oil and having that green transition really fast. They're not trying to be oil dependent from imports forever. They also want to have economic sovereignty, and also the planet and gas emission aren't going away anywhere. And see First Nations rights, and the fact that they're opposed to any building of pipelines leading into the ocean is also not going to go away.
The Energy Minister there, Tim Hodgson, Rob, was talking about the Sovereign Wealth Fund, which I think a lot of us are still trying to understand, mostly because the government hasn't said very much about it, and not because we don't understand the concept. But it certainly seems as though it could be used for a potential pipeline if there was a private proponent, if it needed additional support. I wonder what you make of the idea that fund could eventually end up in that sort of project.
He did eventually get around, Rosie, to your last question and saying, yes, it could be amongst any other things. But there's so much we don't know about it that it's hard to say if it would, get a project over the finish line or not. I thought his comments that Canada can't rely on the ups and downs, the ins and outs of a pipeline project, this Keystone XL Part 2, because it was, canceled by Obama, brought back by Trump, canceled by Biden, brought back by Trump again, that it's not reliable to get too interested in this right now when you don't know. But on the other hand, Mark Carney brought this up in the Oval Office with Donald Trump in October, the idea of Keystone XL. So there's got to be some win in Canada for getting that far, I guess. And I think the idea, I'm not the Prime Minister, but I think the idea was to use it in some way to advance our position with the United States, whether we call that leverage or not. Yeah. And I know the Prime Minister is saying we don't want to use energy as leverage. It just makes sense that we are supplying something the U.S. wants. That's the whole point of the trade talks. So I think I'm not sure how to square all of that into a circle on where Canada stands on this.
I'm not either. And you make the point about what the Prime Minister told our colleagues at the Canadian Press, that he didn't like the word leverage when it comes to energy because the negotiation is about as Rob says there, Nick, things that people want and negotiating how to make that work. I mean, he can say that, but it is also leverage in this instance. And I wonder how we should take both the president signing off on that and then, of course, the idea that we could use taxpayer dollars perhaps to move along a big project.
I mean, there's no question it's leverage. There's a reason that since the trade war began, every Canadian politician, no matter whether they are near the oil patch or thousands of kilometers away, are talking about just how much Canada exports to the United States. I mean, it's been a top, if not negotiating point directly, at least conversation piece in every conversation with probably every American who will listen. But I was also struck, like Rob was, by the energy minister's comments on what he called regulatory volatility in the United States with respect to the Bridger pipeline, a project that was canceled and brought back. He is criticizing the American regulatory environment in a way that sounds not unlike how Canadian energy producers have talked about the Canadian environment. And when the minister was in Houston for Sarah Week, which is like global energy palooza in March, he played good cop down there, and he was talking about being energy dominant with the United States, working together with the United States. And he met with two cabinet secretaries down there, both for energy and interior, and he brought a happy message to them. We are your partner. And so it's interesting to watch him talk in Canada and what he's willing to say on your show. And not that it's particularly contradictory, but it's certainly a different message than the one he would take down to Houston.
Well, I wonder if it's, things have evolved that quickly, and it is difficult to, you're not going to shut down the idea of another pipeline, Emilie, but at the same time, if you're trying to diversify to other markets, as you made the point to begin with, it sort of leaves you struggling to decide where to put your energy. I don't mean that literally. And but tell me whether you think it is part of the negotiation with the United States, Emilie.
I really don't think the negotiation with the United States is based on rational rational arguments. It started with the whole farce about drugs coming in from the Canadian borders and how we had to put on a SAR. It is absolute nonsense. And the Supreme Court of the United States has said that some of the tariffs and the way that Donald Trump has been handling the negotiation has left the land of not only common sense, but also legality a long time ago. And so we need to remember when it came to Keystone XL, I remember hashtag Standing Rock. And the huge protests that were happening from Native Americans, and that is still a thing that hasn't been solved, although it's somehow out of fashion to speak about that. But we really are talking about projects that would harm the environment, trample human rights, to maybe have an argument in a negotiation that isn't based on arguments. And so I'm personally not necessarily following why this is such a great thing, but maybe others have better ways of understanding how this is happening.
I think you make the right point, though. If it's not real, because it has to be signed off on by states and Native American communities and the rest of it, Rob, is it even... Is it even something that's worth considering for the government as a leverage point? And maybe that's what the minister was getting at, too.
It's possible. I mean, what is real without protest in anything at this point? I think the Carney government put a lot of chips down on the table to voters that they were a government that can get big things done again, and you cannot get consensus to do anything in this political day and age. So the idea that Keystone XL Point 2 or the BC Alberta pipeline is going to come through with everyone holding hands and being happy is not the reality. And this government probably is going to have to force things through, especially the BC pipeline, and that may extend down to the U.S. as well.
Nick Taylor Vaisey, Rob Shaw, Emilie Nicolas, thanks. Nice to see you all. Have a good rest of your Sundays. Appreciate it.